So this thinking in systems piece, like we're going through this athlete profiling here, and we'll walk through mine here in a second, but this is going to allow repeated success in the training and intervention. Again, we've got to have a system to what we're doing, right? So can we, starting here, can we identify what the issue is, right? Whether it's on a force plate test, whether it's something sticking out from a 1080, whether it is we're doing ISO testing, like everybody's seen the Alex Natera course, right? ISO version testing. Like conceptually, can we identify what that lowest hanging fruit is, what the limiting factor in that athlete's performance is? And at times, that limiting factor, we call it performance, but if that limiting factor is leading to them missing time because of soft tissue injuries, things like that, that's also performance in our minds. So how can we identify what this athlete needs across movement strategies, force output, anything along those lines? Then, as coaches, can we isolate it? Can we actually define specifically? That's great that we have a number that tells us something, that something's off, different, changing, imbalanced, whatever terminology you want to use in your environment. Do we have the capability to isolate it and then constrain it in training, right? And that, again, like 1080 here is going to give the opportunity to move in so many different directions, train in so many different ways, and we're going to show you some of those examples. But you got to be able to constrain that and then overload that, right? So as a coach, can you identify and then work all the way around and apply that specific red flag, and then you're going to repeat, retest. So identifying the KPIs, measuring accurately, applying the appropriate training stimulus, retest, and course correct, and then repeat. So considerations in improving speed, and I know this slide's got a lot going on. I wasn't talented enough to figure out how to slide these in one at a time. So defining speed in performance, right? This is one of our primary goals in training, right? Again, we got to understand that speed in football is a little unique, and speed in sport in general. So we're not necessarily just, like, we are always trying to improve linear speed, linear acceleration, but we have to understand the bandwidth of this and what speed really means for football. So a lot of times we hear speed and we think running straight ahead, right? But how can we improve our guys' speeds in all of these different positions, coming around the corner, like that ankle-foot position, right? The stress on the hip, the body position. This is going to be more of like a deceleration into reacceleration, right? How do we continue to prepare our guys and enhance their performance in the skills that are actually required on the field? That is great that the guy, like, again, I'm a firm believer that linear speed is going to help with these qualities, but we also need to ensure that we're getting what we can out of our guys in the actual requirements of their sport, crossover running, change of direction, all of those pieces, and that's what we'll dive into here in a second. Again, like, we're not considering any like OODA loop decision making on the field, things like that at this time. Like, we're talking about training the physical outputs of the human body. Then from factors allowing an athlete to express speed. So this is what I really want to get into as we go through some of these testing monitoring tools in this case study of myself, is always want to keep in mind is the direction of the force, right? Vertical, horizontal, the time to produce force, long to short. Like, there's limitations if you're looking at peak ISO testing. Obviously, it takes too long. It's just like why a 1 rep max on a back squat doesn't over time repeatedly improve speed. There's a return on investment from strength because it takes too long to express. So how can we put our athletes in positions to get them to improve the force produced in that minimal time that's available? Contact or shock. So a lot of times we talk about like CMJ and ISO movements. That foot is already in contact with the plate as they load up versus a drop jump, a hop jump, or sprinting where that foot leg has to interact with the ground and the ground hits it back, right? There are very different things going on between those two, and we need to make sure that we're considering that in our training, especially as we attempt to identify potential deficits in our athletes. And then coordination, so muscular and global levels, right? Across having strength in key positions, but also the ability to rapidly switch limbs, right? In sprinting, that's going to be like Ken Clark, the scissoring of the thighs. We know that, right? We know that that's important. So it's not just about being strong. The athlete has to get to that position, and then they have to rapidly eccentric and concentrically load, right, to get through those positions, get to the big posture so they can set up to re-strike the ground in a good position, and then they've got to recycle again. So just some examples here of ground contact time. So this is that time to produce force, long versus short. Like as we talk through here, we've got two-leg vertical jump. You're way at this far end of the spectrum of ground contact time, right? Time to produce force is in this 0.7 range. You got top speed sprinting at 1/10 of a second, even acceleration step 3, right around that 0.15, even acceleration step 1, 0.2. So understanding the amount of time to produce force is significantly different than what it is in a CMJ. Even though I'm going to use CMJ as an example, for me, we got to understand that there's limitations there. And so I always use this example, like as you look at force, like getting our athletes to understand if this blue here is back squat force, right? Like let's just arbitrary units. It's just an example for them to visualize. Like it might take a ton of time to get to this peak force, but in reality, they've got to hit this peak much sooner and at much greater rate. So what are we doing in our training to ensure that they are getting that? And then lastly, the cyclical nature. So all I've done is I've taken this example here and this example and made it this coordination cyclical. Can you rip through from like early hip flexion, right, and early extension at the hip? That's going to be critical in our running. 1080 now. This is me in an acceleration. I did a right leg start versus a left leg start here. And so this yellow, so I'll walk you guys through this. Again, this is the beauty of what 1080 is. Just like the force traces that we looked at on the force plates, this is a force trace, or this is actually speed over position for me. But for every step, you can see what's happening across speed, and then down here is every step across from a force over time. And so the red here is my right leg start. So I'm here to start, driving off my right, and then you can just go step by step, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, all the way through, right? And their software will break this down for you systematically if you want to review some of the key components of each stride. But then we've got this yellow is my left. So left, right, left, right, left, right. So what sticks out right away is that pretty much even on the first stride, my left is not as good as my right. And then you start to really get into this, and we'll get into the asymmetries here in a second. But this was actually really interesting to me. So I was a receiver in college, and I would prefer, if you were to ask me what leg do you want to start with forward, I would pick my left every time. Every time. I am slower off my left than my right. It was actually like really eye-opening. I figured the first 3 steps it would probably be pretty balanced, but what this showed me is like me conceptually as a coach seeing that, thinking that, okay, we know now the testing that what my left leg doesn't like. Am I just trying to avoid one extra step of actually having to contact the ground and drive myself through? Is that why I want to start left? I don't know. That was the most intriguing thing to me, because I would prefer to start here every time compared to this, even though I'm not as good in that stance. So reason, maybe it's fewer shock or impacts on the left. And you can see, again, you can put this in different views. Like on that left, I'll even like roll into the start a little bit before I get going. The best rep, like what we said, the red rep here. Step 1, I was at 2.45, like we call our elite guys at 3. You better be at 3 meters per second on your first step as like a high-level NFL player. Step 2, I'm at 3.67. You better be at 4. Like that's what we want our guys to be at. And then if you are really, really good, we've got a handful of guys. It's really about one or two. that can be at 6 meters per second by their third step, right? That's what we really try and push our guys to get to. So then it's like, how can we implement training to get our guys here based on what they need, pairing it with some of the kinematics film, things along those lines. So again, understanding reduced time to express force paired with deep flexion angles like what we talked about in the counter movement jump especially, right? We talked about that hop jump, even though it's lower leg. Like that's going to be a much more straight knee situation. So when I'm in this deep flexed position, that's where I'm going to run into problems. And it becomes really apparent here. And I know this is small, but this is what this software allows you to do. So I've taken this red rep here, right foot forward, and I can tell the software which step I took first. So now it's saying, oh, the first step was right, then here's your left step, your right, your left. And then you can select which steps you want to look at, right? So acceleration, first three, we're trying to really, I would say for sure the first three, but as we understand every step in acceleration has a different ground contact time, it has a different signature of movement. So if you're trying to compare an asymmetry, I would not try and use your first couple steps, right? Because each one's meant to be different. What we've found, especially acceleration, we'll take it down to 1 typically for our players, 1 kilo. But if we're doing anything that's like high speed, we'll keep it at 3 because it just stabilizes the cord a little bit more. That's what we found with our flies especially. So, but yes, you can track this. This is a 3 kilo example. You could do a load velocity profile on a player. Put it at different loads. We do all of our starts at varying resistances or speed decrements, things along those lines. So that's the beauty of the maneuverability of 1080. So when we compare these steps here, again, I know this is really tiny, so I'm sorry, but what you end up with out of this group, you get 3 steps on the left and you got 3 steps on the right. So on this left leg here, I have a longer distance here. It's 1.52 meters is the average distance with each step on my left. 1.44 on the right, so less distance, but then the frequency is different as well. So my frequency on the right is at 4.7 hertz. My frequency on the left is at 4.3. So to me, what that tells me is that number one, the right limb is more capable to tolerate forces in key positions in minimal time. So that frequency picks up, even though, like, again, initial thought is, oh, the distance isn't as great. But the way that I look at that is with the frequency being down and the left stride being longer, my left, because of its inability to impact the ground, drive me forward, what I end up doing is I'm going to end up reaching a little bit more with that left to give me that longer stride length, to give me that longer ground contact time to then pull myself through, right? So conceptually, like we don't always necessarily want to say, oh, get as much distance as you can in your acceleration strides, because if they're overstriding, you've got to be able to give yourself, number one, enough time, air time to get that leg into the right position to then drive back and get to the right position to propel you forward. So that's what sticks out to me first thing on this acceleration. And you can see it here, like again, this is going to be force over time. Just eyeballing it, if this is a left step, that's a right step. Force produced, left step, right step, left step, right step. So there's it's a 10% lower force across those 6 steps, but then the average force here being 67 and 74 on the right, like those numbers stick out to me. Again, understanding the amount of force, and I got to dig into this a little bit more, but I was talking to Corfus a little bit, and maybe you can tell me, but like, what does it take, like 40 or 45 just to get yourself kind of like going, right?